Research Talk. We have been spending a lot of time on the first cycle of coding in qualitative research. We talked about different ways of coding the data. One question that I often being asked by students mostly is, you are explaining all these different ways of coding data. Tell me which strategy is the best coding strategy. And I have my own answer based on my experience of conducting qualitative research. So I'll share what should be a kind of approach that gives you a better understanding, a deeper understanding of the research, a deeper understanding of the data that you have collected. But before I do that, I want to just talk briefly about what we have discussed up to now and how they are sort of come together, all of them. So the first thing we talked about, remember the strategies we have covered up to now, they are first cycle of coding strategies. First cycle, meaning that this is the first round of coding, and then we will also discuss some second round coding strategies and how you come up with themes and categories. So the first thing first, this is the first round, first cycle of coding include what we have discussed up to now. We started with descriptive coding strategy. Then we discussed process coding strategy. Then we discussed in vivo coding strategy. Then we discussed concept coding strategies. And these strategies are very helpful to get a better sense of the data and move in the process of developing categories and themes from your data. So these are sort of a first cycle coding strategies, main strategies. But then there are some supplemental strategies which can be attached with any strategies. So and also they are part of the first cycle coding. Some supplemental strategies, and we talked about the first one was emotion coding. Then we talked about value coding. Then we talked about versus coding strategies. Emotion coding, value coding, versus coding. So we started with first cycle of coding, and all these strategies are first cycle coding strategies. Along with these strategies, we also discussed some supplemental ways of coding which can be used with either of these first cycle coding approaches. Now, all these methods are exploratory methods. What does it mean? Exploratory methods that the codes are emerging from the data. So we do not have a predetermined, pre-established codes. We look at the transcript, we look at the data, and we start with coding those data, and the codes are emerging from the data. So that's why we call it exploratory methods of coding. Another first cycle coding method is just other way around. So rather than exploratory, it is predetermined, and we call it protocol coding. So we discussed protocol coding. How does it look like in practice? And protocol coding, unlike all these methods which uses exploratory approach, this is like top-down approach where the codes are pre-decided. So as a researcher, you develop your code in advance based on prior studies related to the topic you are exploring, based on some conceptual or theoretical framework, and then you use these codes to code your data. So pre-established coding style, which is called protocol coding. So all these methods, whether exploratory methods or top-down methods, are first cycle of coding approaches. Now, as I said previously, what is the best method? So over the years doing qualitative research, what I've seen is having an eclectic approach is very powerful to develop a deeper understanding of the data. Why it is so? So let's first talk about what is eclectic approach. Eclectic approach is when I'm coding the data based on what I want to focus on, based on what is my goal, I can choose either of the methods and supplement it with some other methods. And sometimes I can use 2 or 3 or all types of coding approach together. So eclectic approach is what gives me the best understanding of the data. So let's say if I have an excerpt here, I'm just saying it's an A4 size page, and let's say this is interview transcript here, and I need to code, right? So I need to code here on the margins. So maybe based on what is shared here, maybe a versus code seems more fit. So I can use a versus code here. Maybe here participant talk about some very deep emotional feelings. So I can use emotion coding here. Maybe the participant is talking about some process, some social processes. He's using words like because, therefore, if. So that shows like there is a process, and maybe I'm doing a grounded theory study. As you know, in grounded theory, the focus is on understanding a social process, understanding a framework, a social framework, and coming up with a theory, a process, a framework that explain the social phenomenon that I'm trying to explore. So if I'm doing a grounded theory, I'm sure in process coding is going to be my top approach. But along with using the process, I can use in vivo, where in vivo coding, which means that I can use the phrase or the words that the participant themselves are using to make it more realistic. Along with using process code, I can use concept code too. So based on, I can focus on the excerpt and think about what conceptual idea this participant is sharing. And then I can supplement with emotion coding, value coding, where the person might talk about some of the personal beliefs, values. So I can use those coding as well. So you see, eclectic coding is an approach where you use any one of these approaches. You don't use this one, but any one of these approaches based on the need of your study. So personally, I recommend using an eclectic approach, and that will give you, in my opinion, more deeper understanding of the phenomenon that you are investigating. So we have covered first cycle of coding. Now we will, in our next video, I'm going to talk about what you do after first cycle of coding. How do you organize your codes? And once we talk about those things, then we will move to some other methods which are called second cycle of coding. So we'll go there shortly in our next videos. I hope this whole what I wanted to explain it to you, different ways of coding the qualitative data, I'm sure it should have been helpful to you. If you got any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to me and I'll do my best to help you understand these concepts. Till then, have a good rest of the day and I'll see you again.